I'm a pilot and flight instructor myself. I've been flying since about 1989, so almost 30 years or so. And I fly a lake amphibian here and around the Tampa, Florida area. This talk is devoted to flying drones and the risks that we're at when we do so. And the goal of this is to help broaden your understanding of the necessity to be careful when you're flying a drone and to make sure that you have appropriate insurance. Good lawyers out there, and I'm going to try to make you, a part of you, a good lawyer tonight so that you have some takeaways, is simply one who recognizes the various issues involved in a problem. Next slide. And in my view, when it comes to drone work, because many of the pilots operating drones haven't been fully trained and gone through the manned pilot regimen that the FAA imposes for certifying manned pilots, they're a little bit at risk because of the requirements are just simply different. And building up that reservoir of experience it takes time. And until that reservoir of experience is full, you have some risk in appreciating the risks that you're at in flying drones and, for that matter, other aircraft. And because we're at risk, it's important to always be cognizant of insurance and its presence and need in aviation matters, and especially including drones. So drone problems can start in a variety of ways. We have drone events or occurrences or incidents, or hopefully you won't ever have one of these. We can have a drone accident where there is substantial damage to the drone or people or the like. Next slide. And it may seem impossible that something untoward can happen, but it happens all the time, and I'll talk in a little bit about my interview of an aviation insurance broker and agent and the claims that he has seen come in under his drone insurance that he brokers. So again, my critical question for you to ask yourself is each time is, are you insured for the contemplated flight activity? And are you insured for the unthinkable? Next slide. We tend to think of crashes just about airplanes, and we're all too familiar with them. They happen regularly. A good way to search for drone crashes is in the NASA form website that you can search and key in a word, drones. I did so the other night in preparation for this talk, and I got 499 hits in the aviation safety reporting system. That means that drones are maybe not coming, maybe they've already just arrived. Next slide. I have a good friend in the FAA that I talk to regularly, and he and I like to focus on the problem of aircraft and drones and the risk that you create by crashing into a daycare center. And in this crash, which was in Florida, in Fort Myers a few years ago, there was a crash. It was a manned aircraft, but it doesn't mean that it can't happen to a unmanned aircraft that crashed into a daycare center. Fortunately, the daycare center was empty at the time and no lives were lost, but you can see the damage that occurred. There was a fire, the pilot passed away, and the aircraft was destroyed. And so this is to underscore the importance of carrying insurance and being well-trained, thoughtful, and deliberate and purposeful in your drone flights. We tend to think of them as toys and that they can't hurt anybody or can't get us in trouble, but as you'll see, they can. Next slide. So this is one of the insurance examples from the broker that I interviewed and spoke with in preparation for this talk. And I said, "What's your biggest claim so far in drone insurance that you've written?" And he said, "Well, we had a drone. The operator was pretty experienced, but there was a little bit of wind and the drone crashed into a plate glass window. It was an $80,000 claim because the drone went into the window with some quite force and broke the window." And so you can see the issues here. Was there enough drone insurance? Was the drone pilot covered by the insurance? Was the drone pilot certificated, trained, competent, and proficient? The glass that broke could have injured other people. And there's just a whole host of issues involved in drone flights every time we go up, from the equipment to the flying conditions to the pilot to the airspace and the like, that must be reckoned with. And so we need to treat the drones not as toys or things that amuse us, but as they are under federal law, and that is aircraft. Next slide. So I have a slide that I like, and it's this one that I use to try to impress upon drone and manned pilots as well that they should trust but verify. And that is, before flying, you want to make sure that the drone insurance policy that you have, you want to actually see and touch the declaration page and the actual insurance policy to verify before you fly, and trust that your flight and the contemplated flight activity involved, whether it's doing a roof inspection or agricultural application or just for pleasure, is covered. Next slide. So as I said, the key issue is the drone pilot insured? And you must insist on documentation before flying. I've seen this in particular where companies hire third parties to conduct the drone flight. And the analogy here is that when you and I board a flight, we take for granted that that pilot has been trained, certificated, is capable and competent and ready to fly that day. By analogy, when we, as simply people looking to fly and do a drone mission for us, whether it's photographic, agricultural, inspection, or the like, we take for granted, you see, that the pilot up front has gone through this certification process and the like, but it's much less rigorous, and the FAA rules and the like are not as rigorously applied to drone pilots as they are to manned pilots. And this is a recipe that can be problematic for people contracting with companies that fly drones or individuals who fly drones for a particular mission. And in that regard, we need to check these issues here that I've listed. Is the drone pilot a named insured? Is the drone pilot's employer insured? Is the drone pilot working or flying within the scope of his or her employment? I'll show you a scope of employment issue here in a little bit. Is this an insured flight activity? For example, if this is a nighttime drone operation, does insurance cover that nighttime drone operation, or is the insurance policy limited to daytime drone flight operations? You know, the general rule under Part 107 is that there are no nighttime drone flights permitted unless there's a waiver. And so you'd want to ensure that you not only saw the waiver, but that the drone pilot is insured for nighttime flight activity. And then finally, going back to Missouri and the show me state, you just don't want to rely on this verbally. You want to have a copy of the insurance declaration page and the insurance policy, if possible, before you authorize the flight by a third-party vendor who's providing drone services, whether that's an individual or company, because you are hiring that person and now you're responsible. We talked a little bit ago about drone pilot deviations, and you'll see that in this slide, for example, the operator here that we're looking at on the far left in the dark top crashed the drone into himself. Next slide. In this one, a hawk got the drone, and there was a collision and a crash. Next slide. In this one, the golf ball came real close to the drone. Next slide. In this one, there was no problem, but it just goes to show you how drones are being used around the world in different applications that are ever expanding. Next slide. Including drones are being used all over to help fishermen catch fish and to spot fish and the like. Next slide. And then in this one, the goose versus the drone. Go ahead. And then finally, you've seen probably a lot in the media recently about the drone pizza delivery going on. This is Amazon, this is FedEx, all sorts of people are going with a lot of energy to get to what's called first to market, to be able to brag that they first got the authorization to deliver drugs or pizza or whatever you have by drone. None, I think, are actually doing deliveries quite yet on a routine basis, as you and I might consider them, where you would order a pizza and have it delivered. But it's on the horizon once a few problems are solved, such as beyond line of sight and nighttime and the like. Next slide. The other issue we have, and I had this recently when I took a drone flying class, we had a good wind that day, and every launch pushed the drone downwind by probably 50 or 60, 70 feet or more. And that is, drones and bad weather don't mix, just like manned aircraft and bad weather don't mix. Next slide. This is a way of talking about the fact that at least in Florida, every 6 months we get insurance cards. And it's pretty easy to realize and see, hey, I've got car insurance, I've got a card, it's valid, it's extended for the next 6 months. But we'd rarely look at the declaration page. We rarely look at whether I'm a named insured. And these are the same issues that confront the drone pilot. And people hiring drone pilots, as I've mentioned to you before. I'm getting a sign here, Ben, that the audio seems to have stopped. So I'm not sure what's going on here, but maybe somebody else can send something in if you can't hear. Next slide.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Great.
Okay.
And I think I got a message from somebody else who's watching that they can hear as well. So I'm not sure if it's a momentary glitch or not. So let's talk about drone surveillance statutes. Many states are adopting these. I believe Alaska has one. And that is, if you fly your drone, look at the underlined portion here of the slide, with intent to conduct surveillance on the individual or property captured in the image in violation of such person's reasonable expectation of privacy, then you may have a problem. You're not allowed to do that in Florida. And so if you do that in Florida, there's a private civil cause of action that can be filed against you. And so I bring this up so that you understand that there is a lot of scrutiny by drones right now around the nation, because it's an evolving area. And so many states are adopting laws prohibiting surveillance. So I'm connecting this to the theme I mentioned earlier to you, that it's important to have drone insurance for your operation, whether it's simply recreational or something else, whether it's a contractor or a bridge inspection or the like. And that's because drone insurance, you see, has a good drone insurance has a defamation and privacy violation provision in it that will protect you against right of privacy or defamation if you were to take a photo or do surveillance or come too close to someone who said you caught their image and put it on Instagram or the like, or violated their right to privacy. There's no way to get that kind of coverage other than through drone insurance. All right, next slide. So let's take a look at some of these sample drone regulations. Florida Administrative Code prohibits drones on management lands. City of Bonita Springs says no flying drones at a community park in Bonita Springs. The City of Miami has regulated them. So has the City of Orlando, saying can't fly drones within 500 feet of city-owned parks and the like. And so has the University of Tampa. Next slide. And so has Alaska. Alaska has various regulations about flying drones in state parks. And so before you fly there or in any other state, you need to be checking local law to find out what the rules and regulations are. So let's talk about this just for a second, because it's a common pilot question, and that is, how in the heck does state law regulate drones if the FAA under Title 49, Section 40103, can regulate the national airspace from just above the last blade of grass in your yard up into and into outer space? Okay, how can the FAA permit such rules and regulations by Alaska, state of Florida, the University of Tampa, and the like? And that's because these are not regulating flight. They're simply stopping it and saying at the outset, you can't operate in this area. They're not regulating how to fly. They're simply regulating where you can fly. And so states and counties and boroughs and other governmental entities and authorities can do that under their zoning laws that permit them to regulate other activity where it occurs, like boats and the like, for the safety, health, and education and welfare of its citizens. So I want to talk to you about different kinds of insurance now that you should have if you're flying a drone, as well as if you're flying a manned aircraft. And that is that there's insurance for the FAA drone pilot, what's called certificate action. So the FAA is empowered, you see, because it licenses drone pilots to seek revocation or suspension of a drone pilot's remote pilot certificate through what's called a certificate action. And the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association provides insurance here. It's a great benefit. It's $99 a year, and you get a FAA enforcement lawyer for up to 20 hours if you ever face a drone enforcement action by the FAA. That's different than trying to insure, you see, for a crash or from a violation of right of privacy or for hull damage to your drone. That's what regular insurance provides for, and that's in number 2, insurance for drone damage, crash, liability, privacy, and medical payments, if any medical payments were required. Say you were injured or injured somebody in a drone insurance or a drone accident. Number 3, tail insurance is insurance that's provided. A lot of people buy this who are kind of anxious about what happens if they sell their aircraft and that aircraft then is involved in a crash. and a plaintiff's injury firm sues not only the owner, the current owner of the plane and its pilot, but also the former owner because it wasn't maintained correctly. And so this insurance is out there and can be purchased. I don't know if it's available for drones, but it's something that you might consider when and if you sell your drone, if you want to be particularly cautious and circumspect. And then finally, there's insurance for the drone flight instructor who might be accused of negligently instructing, not telling somebody, for example, you can't fly beyond line of sight or at night, and an accident occurs and someone is injured or the like. And then finally, at the bottom, I think is the most important here, and that is insurance, you see, not only protects for the loss involved, the damage caused, the harm inflicted and the like by a drone crash, but you also get a lawyer. The insurance company provides you with a lawyer to defend you against any claims. And that can be a large cost that you'd want to insure for if you're going to be flying drones and want to protect yourself. Next slide. So let's take a look at some of these claims to bring reality to all these insurance issues I've been talking about. And that is, these are some of the notes that I took when I was interviewing the insurance broker who brokers drone insurance. He told me one was a drone was hits a moving car, and the driver went off the side of the road and had an accident. And so there would be an insurance claim here, and it'd be a good idea, wouldn't it, to have drone insurance. Another one, he said, was a person was watching a drone fly over a moving car, and the driver went off the road and was injured. Sounds like you wouldn't be at fault here, but remember, it's just the claim, okay, that can put you at risk for damages or a judgment or a lawsuit. And so you may want to think about insuring against this possible risk if you're flying drones. Here's a privacy violation. A drone flies over a swimming pool a little too close for a woman in a bikini. And so it gives rise to a potential privacy claim or a drone surveillance claim. Another one he told me about was a drone flying over horses in a corral, and it spooked the horses and they got out, and the owner had to spend quite a bit of money to recapture all the horses that were in the corral. A more realistic one here is that a drone, this was in the newspaper a couple years ago, hit the tail rotor of a helicopter in Los Angeles at 1,100 feet above ground level, and there was a problem. And then lastly, the drone crashed into the $80,000 plate glass window that I told you about earlier. All these, and there are dozens more of these examples to show you that drone flying does have some risks. And it's important for you to make a conscious decision. Am I going to insure against it? How am I going to deal with that potential loss? Next slide. So again, reiterating here, and Victoria can share this PowerPoint with any of you that ask for it, or you can email me, and I'll provide it to you as a reminder of some of this information. Number one, aviation liability insurance provides insurance if a third party is injured or there's property damage. Then there's personal and advertising insurance. It's protection for violation of privacy rights. Say you hire a drone person to do some bridge work, but on the way there during the drone operation, he sees a campsite and he wants to do some surveillance. You haven't authorized that, but you get involved in a claim for flying too close to people or violating their right of privacy. Number C, hull insurance. That's damage to the actual drone. You may have an expensive drone, or it may be a throwaway, and that's what insurance can provide for as well. And then finally, medical payments if someone's injured. Next slide. So who sells this drone liability insurance? Well, someone had tapped in already a message that one of the apps out there are many drone apps now. You can apply for insurance before you launch your drone. And so many companies sell drone insurance. I think Old Republic does, Global Aerospace. And the one that I'm familiar with that there is an app for is called Verifly. These are one-time drone insurances that take some information from you through an app on your iPhone. And you tell them where you're going to fly, how high, and other fact pieces, and they issue a policy to you for a limited period of time. I have no experience whether Verify pays on their claims. They very well may. I'm not endorsing them or not endorsing them. I'm just saying, again, do your due diligence before you simply rely upon that so that you are ensure that you're covered. Here's what Verify looks at. I ran a sample insurance on Verify, and the quote I got to do near where I work in Tampa, Florida at my law firm was $25. And someone recently told me that now Verify has been purchased by Thimble. Then I put the website on the left side there for you, thimble.com. Next slide. We're circling back a little bit because I like to mention this a couple of times, and that is the AOPA Legal Services Plan. This is not for hull insurance or if your drone crashes. This is if the FAA undertakes a certificate action seeking to suspend or revoke your remote pilot certificate or issue you a warning letter or tells you need to take another check ride or wants to impose a civil monetary penalty. I've defended drone pilots before in the past who have violated temporary flight restrictions, including presidential airspace and Super Bowl airspace and the like. And it's no fun. It's a lot of emotional turmoil when the FAA comes after you and sends you what's called a 10-day letter saying explain why you were flying your drone in the protected airspace. So it's a good idea to lawyer up, but it's even a better idea to join the AOPA Legal Services Plan for $99 and call them and get a drone lawyer who is knowledgeable in enforcement actions to help you out in these trying times. Next slide. So I have I noticed in the invite list that I have several FAA people listening in, and that's wonderful to understand an aviation lawyer's perspective here, and that is this, and that is whenever there's an accident or an incident, the person who's been involved in it really isn't thinking. They're just not right after an accident, near in time to what can be a disturbing thing emotionally. Maybe they've crashed, maybe they've injured somebody or the like. And so I encourage people not to speak right away with the FAA until they've collected their thoughts. Maybe they've thought with talk to a lawyer. So I say follow the 3-day rule. Don't talk for 3 days other than giving your name and address. You want to be cooperative. You're trying to get to the bottom of this, and I'll tell you why. It's helpful to do that here in a moment. But if you're going to say anything, be a minimalist. And you want to file what's called a NASA report form every time you've had an accident or an incident where you think the FAA may be scrutinizing. And the reason you want to be a minimalist is because your head is not on right. You're not thinking and the like, and so it's safer and more prudent to do this. Now, at the appropriate time, you can talk to the FAA, and since 2015, when the FAA adopted the Compliance Action Program, it's to your advantage to share what happened with the FAA so that you can help them identify what the root cause was involved. You might be able to avoid a sanction because nowadays the FAA focuses as much on in their enforcement program as on trying to identify the root cause of the incident and to fix it going forward so it doesn't happen again, rather than trying to take your remote pilot certificate or suspend it or revoke it and the like. So we have some statutes around the United States, and Alaska is one of them, that focuses on careless or reckless operation of aircraft. And a drone is an aircraft. The NTSB told us that in a decision several years ago. And most state statutes cover drones and when they talk about aircraft. Here's Florida's, and it says that you can't operate an aircraft, meaning a drone, in the air or on the ground in a careless or reckless manner. This statute also says, and many of them do, that we look to the federal aviation regulations to decide what is careless or reckless. And so if you flew a drone at night without a waiver, the prosecuting authority might think that that was evidence that you had a night flight without a waiver of recklessness or carelessness and might charge you. In Florida, it's actually a third-degree felony, but I looked it up, and in Alaska, it appears to be a misdemeanor. But nevertheless, this is going to change you as a person, because no one wants to be accused of a crime, especially for flying a drone and the like. So it's good, again, to be careful. Does drone insurance cover you for this? No, it doesn't. You can't insure against criminal acts. You can just be a wise drone pilot and try to avoid them by being trained and competent and proficient. Next slide. So I've not defended anybody in a federal criminal prosecution yet for operating a drone, but there are plenty out there. In fact, the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Justice, that's the United States Department of Justice, just issued a report yesterday seeing how, stating and reporting on how they're seeing more and more drones being used to try to bring cell phones, guns, drugs, and the like into federal prisons. So drone use is expanding in a number of areas, from Amazon all the way to bridge inspections, all the way to people trying to use them to carry or get contraband into prisons. Go ahead. But you may think this is a long shot, but let's look at a couple of cases here. Pennsylvania man was charged with unlawfully operating a drone. This is in federal court, not state court, not your little local state court in Alaska somewhere or in Orlando, Florida, or Key West. But someone was charged with knowingly operating an unregistered aircraft, a drone. And in the second one, someone flew a drone over an NFL game and was dropping some leaflets, and he got prosecuted just about a year and a half ago, charging him with operating a drone by violating national airspace regulations and the like. These are federal prosecutions where you have to go in front of a federal judge. So they're nothing that you want to mess with. Here's a picture of Dad, my father, the 747 captain. And what I'm trying to show you here is on the left, a drone pilot, what they have to go through to seek certification from the FAA, and what an airline pilot does. Let's take a look on the left. And I see this all the time. You buy the drone, you fly the drone, you crash the drone, or you fly into restricted airspace or a TFR, or you fly too close to an airport and the like, and so there's an FAA prosecution through a civil enforcement action, and other bad stuff can happen. And it really stems from the fact that we treat these drones like toys, and the certification of our drone pilots. You know, we've talked about Part 107 and how to get certified as a drone pilot tonight, but you can also fly without, flying under Part 107. You can fly as a recreational pilot, meaning I'm following the Academy of Model Aeronautics rules and regulations and the like. For the most part, they parrot. They're the same. like night flight and beyond line of sight and the like as the FAA rules, but it just shows you that not a lot of training and experience with weather and airspace is required when you're flying recreationally. You might be obligated by the rules on their face to know these things, but practically speaking, it's buy and fly. The airline pilot, on the other hand, on the far right, what happens? A student pilot, get a FAA medical, there's flight training, there's FAA written examinations, there's check rides, there's insurance requirements, there's hour requirements minimum for private pilot, commercial, and ATP and the like. There's currency and competency checks and requirements, and there's a lot more rigorous regulation, you see, than simple buy and fly. Next slide. So we're entering this era of the Jetsons. We thought it was unthinkable years ago. We'd be flying drones and they'd be remote. And this really only just started 4 or 5 years ago when the software engineers came up with the ability to manufacture a drone using GPS and the like that would fly stable. Before then, we had to balance those 3 or 4 propellers, didn't we? All at the same time, and it wasn't an easy thing. Next slide. And so you expose yourself and your employer to a drone negligence claim if you're just not careful. And I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but all of these issues are flagged and important in considering whether you're one of those people with a risk and a risk to the national airspace and others, or if you're a low risk manned or unmanned. Are you a risk taker? Do you follow the rules and like? Next slide. Okay, so opportunities for drone problems. What are these? These are the ones I see a lot because they come from Part 107 and from the recreational rules. Drone flights over people, drone flights at night, beyond visual line of sight. You can't fly your drone unless you got a waiver without or maintaining line of sight. There's been only 240 waivers in FAA's records for people to fly beyond line of sight. Bad weather, and fly in really bad weather. There are weather minimums for drones. We have drone mechanical issues, cracked propellers, batteries, and the like, broken gimbals. All sorts of issues can arise. Then we have pilot experience and competency, and probably the granddaddy of them all are airspace violations under 107.41, where the pilot may not be terribly experienced in trying to figure out, can I fly here and near the airport and in this airspace? Go ahead. So here's one. 107.39 says you can't fly over a person. And so a lot of people think, well, that means directly over. I can fly near them. But if your forward motion, you see, might bring you into proximity, close proximity to a person, the preamble to 107 talks about forward flight and flight energy and inertia. And so you can be found to have violated 107.39, even if you're not flying directly over the person. I was involved in a matter where we had videos because most of the drones have videos now and people just like to take pictures with them. And this person was flying over and over people all the time. The proof was in the photographs. Next slide. One thing that people don't really realize is how important this is, and that is what airspace am I flying my drone in? And am I flying as a Part 107 pilot or as a recreational drone pilot? The airspace limitations are really the same as I understand it, but a lot of people simply just don't check first. There's a great FAA app out there. I encourage all of you to familiarize yourself with it. It's called Before You Fly. It actually works. It works well. And I'm going to show you something here in a moment. Next slide. So this is the airspace in and around Anchorage Airport. I call this Airspace 101 and Part 10741. And so what I did was used Before You Fly to do a theoretical flight from Merrill Field, which is in Anchorage, but it's not, of course, the main international airport there. Next slide. And so this is what Before You Fly told me when I plugged this, when I tapped on Merrill Field using Before You Fly. I got a nice red message, which was do not fly, flights are prohibited. And I was told two things: Anchorage, Alaska terminal area, permanent flight restrictions. And then secondly, I was told Anchorage, Merrill Field, I'm in Class E2. I'm in Class E airspace, okay, which is controlled airspace. And airspace authorization is required. So a lot of people are still struggling with this because the rules and regulations here are not clear. It says airspace authorizations required. Who authorizes me to fly there? Well, you can call ATC and put them on notice that I'm going to fly near Merrill Field at this geographic lat long. But who does the actual authorization? You see, ATC doesn't authorize, or do they? They may be delegated in circumstances to this authorization function, but it can be the FAA, you see, that authorizes the flight. So now I've introduced a two-step problem here that most drone pilots don't know about or may ignore and simply not seek the authorization from ATC to fly in controlled airspace, or may not know how to go about approaching the FAA about a flight in controlled airspace to, for example, do a bridge inspection or some other lawful kind of drone flight. All this information and more can be found, however, at www.faa.gov. I encourage you to go there. It's just like learning when you get a new laptop, however, you've got to turn it on and drive and look and spend some time there. It's not intuitive. You just have to invest the time. Next slide. Now, the third area I see a lot is beyond visual line of sight. Like I told you before, there's only been 240 waivers for this that the FAA has granted. The rest of us, in the absence of a waiver, I have to fly visual line of sight. That means I got to maintain sight unaided by any telescopes, binoculars, or anything else of the drone during my flight. Next slide. So what are some of our takeaways? The takeaways are, don't think it can't happen to you. Your drone can get caught up in the electrical lines and you can have a big problem. Your drone can do a lot of things and you can have big problems. So it's important to be insured, and not only to insure for loss of limb or damage to your drone or property, but to insure through AOPA your remote pilot certificate or your manned pilot certificate. Next slide. If you don't, here's what this looks like. So I do a lot of pilot defense work, and this is an excerpt from what's called the FAA's 10-day letter. And that means that after an incident, a problem, an occurrence, an accident, okay, the FAA becomes aware of it somehow, and they send you a 10-day letter, and they send it to the address that you have on file for your remote pilot certificate within the FAA's official records. So if that's not current, you need to bring that up to date, because if you don't timely respond, you are probably out of luck. But this is what it says. Personnel of this office, this FISDO, are investigating an incident that occurred on such and such a date involving your having operated without authorization a drone in airspace that was then and there subject to a temporary flight instruction. And this one was just for a TFR violation, but you can fill in the blank. It can be beyond line of sight. It can be at nighttime. It can be all sorts of the violations that or regulations and that we've talked about so far tonight. Next slide. And we also have to deal with this problem, and that is the drone flyaway. I think there perhaps, because I'm not a drone operator that does this for a business or a livelihood, but I do enough. I'm spending enough time around drones and pilots and the like to know that I think flyaways are the rate of the incidence of this is going down, but nevertheless, it's still a problem. And that can be big problems for you as a drone operator in a flyaway. Next slide. So there you have it. I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm going to turn it back to Victoria to wind down and maybe send me any questions that we might have. I appreciate your time. Again, I work at Carlton Fields, a 300-lawyer law firm in Tampa, Florida, and I do aviation work across the country. It's been my pleasure to tell you more about drones and the risks involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed, for that presentation. Like he said earlier, we will be putting the recording on our YouTube channel. So if you missed something and you want to go back or if you came in late, you'll be able to see it there. And let's see here. I'm looking at the group chat, and I think this might have been addressed during the presentation, but at the beginning, Jeff Oliver asked or mentioned that AirMap has a built-in on-demand drone insurance function. It requires buying standby insurance and then a daily monthly insurance cost. And are there other options? So I think you might have gone over that a little bit, but if there's any other details, Jeff was wondering.
Yeah, I would go on the App Store and just check out drone or drone insurance. And the one I told you about was Verifly. Again, I don't have any experience here, so if you really want to be thoughtful and deliberate about this, you'd want to do some research. Insurance companies, you see, are licensed by the state. Okay, and so they're going to keep records about what kind of reserves they have and their claim history and the like. And you may want to do that kind of due diligence before you just use an app to say, well, I'm covered, because that's not really being from the state of Missouri and the show me state where you say, well, let me do a little more due diligence, you see, before I take my drone and break an $80,000 plate glass window. Now, you know, lawyers are blamed all the time. They're deal killers, and they're obstructionists, and they, you know, the big print giveth and the small print taketh away, and all that. But you know what? That's what an insurance contract does. The big print giveth. You're covered, and the small print taketh away, and that says that only covers you if you're not flying at night or what have you. So I'm a big person about, let me see it in writing. I want to check it out first. Now, once I'm satisfied the company's good and their standard insurance language in their contracts, okay, insurance policies are just contracts, then I feel more at ease of using Verifly, pardon the pun, on the fly or some other app, okay? But until I've done my due diligence, you're going to be calling me going, I want to go after the insurance company, okay? So honestly, you know, my takeaway here for everybody listening in, if you're going to fly a drone and you're a rookie, and you know what? I'm a rookie. I don't have many hours flying drones. I just know the issues because I get the phone calls. I think you really need what I'm going to call right now, you need a drone mentor. Find somebody who's been flying for a while. They've got 50 hours under their experience. They do it for a living. They inspect bridges. whatever. They're out there, okay? And that way you can run some things by that person and go, hey, can you just give me the benefit of your wisdom, which came from experience, which came from problems and bad judgment? And that way you'll be a safer drone pilot. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ed, again. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to email them to me. My email address is victoria@alaskaairmen.org. All right. I think that about does it for tonight. Thanks again, Ed.
Thank you. Take care. Good night, everybody.